Again, I can't stress enough, it's not health food. Today we are making one of our favorite recipes,
butter chicken.
And we're making a bit of naan on the side. And should probably warn you in advance that this is a bit of work. One of the nice things about it though is that you can make almost every component in advance. And so that is exactly what we're gonna do. We've just finished our coffee and now we are gonna start the naan. For the naan, we are starting with 3/4 of a cup of warm water. And we're adding to that 1 teaspoon of dry yeast. It doesn't actually need to be activated like this, but we're not doing anything, so why not? And so now we're gonna mix together our dry ingredients, starting with 2 cups or 240 grams of all-purpose flour. One thing to note though is that this is a very high hydration dough. It is gonna be incredibly sticky. We're gonna have to add probably a lot more flour into it, but we wanna make sure we add as little as possible. To our flour, we are adding a teaspoon of salt, a teaspoon of sugar, and about 1/8 of a teaspoon of baking soda. Mix those together. And now we're not quite yet ready for the water, but we are gonna add our fats. We're starting with 2.5 tablespoons of plain yogurt. It's also, importantly enough, not low fat or fat free.
We also use King Arthur flour, which is...
Yes, this video is sponsored by King Arthur flour. For when you need the absolute best, choose the king. We're also adding 2 tablespoons of oil. Before I start kneading though, I want to set aside some extra flour because this recipe is going to require a lot of extra. It's a bit annoying, but the recipe works so well that I can't bring myself to replace it. So we're going to start by mixing up our oil and yogurt. And kind of like with a pie crust, you want it to crumble a bit into little grains. We just want to coat as much of the flour as we can with some of that fat. And we just want to evenly disperse it all. So our yeast mixture is starting to foam and we are ready to add it in. I'm going to add it in stages just because I know how quickly this will become just a sloppy mess. Can you hear how difficult this dough is going to be to work with? This is not a smooth, sticky dough. This is a soup. About a tablespoon at a time, I'm going to try to work in some more flour. See if we can get this into a passable dough shape. I promise you, I want to not use this recipe, but it does work out so well every time. We don't need it to be that thoroughly kneaded. We do need to make it into at least a soft dough. Right now it's incredibly sticky. And I'm trying to be very gentle with it because it is so sticky that if I press it hard, it's just gonna become a big smear. So we're just gonna knead it till we feel like it's okay. And I feel like that's pretty good. And let this guy rise for about 3 or 4 hours until it's doubled in size. We're just gonna set that aside, and as we said, one of the benefits of this recipe, or one of the saving graces of this recipe, is that you can cook each of these pieces in advance. So we're gonna go ahead and make the chicken because that's gonna take up our attention, it's gonna take up our oven space, and we don't wanna have to deal with it. Plus, it's incredibly easy to throw together. For the chicken, we are gonna set it to a high broil. And we've got the oven rack about 6 inches from the broiler. For this recipe, we are using about 2 pounds of chicken thighs, but we do want them boneless and skinless, so they do need to be trimmed up a little bit.
Or you can just buy.
These were $2 cheaper. Just want to slice the tendons as you go. You're not holding the knife parallel, because otherwise you're going to dull the blade. It's not like the most fun you could possibly have, but it's not that bad. And now we have a boneless chicken thigh. Plus, we've saved $2.
Is $2 worth your time?
It always is at the grocery store. So that only took a couple minutes, and on top of that, sometimes our butcher is pretty inconsistent. Overall, I think it's worth the 2 minutes. To these chicken thighs, we are adding a half cup of plain yogurt. And then to our chicken, we're adding about a teaspoon of salt. And just mixing that up with our hands. Oh my God, it's all so cold. So this yogurt is gonna help the chicken blacken, and while that's generally something you want to avoid, in this case, it is where almost all of the flavor of the chicken's gonna come from. We do want it to come out of there pretty charred. Okay, so we've prepared a baking sheet lined with foil with the rack inside, and I'm gonna go ahead and spray it down as well because we really don't want this to stick. These are gonna go in for about 10 minutes aside. So this is exactly what we're looking for. There's some char, but it's not entirely black. We've got these flipped and we're just gonna throw them in for about 6 to 10 more minutes. I'm just gonna keep an eye on them. So we've got a little bit of char on both sides. So we are just gonna let those cool, and then we are going to chop them into about 1-inch pieces. Before we can start our sauce, we are gonna prepare a couple vegetables. We are going to dice 1 white onion.
You're crying it.
We are also dicing up 1 serrano pepper. The recipe calls for seedless, and you can definitely do that, but we are going to leave them in just because we like it a little spicier. And then we are mincing 5 garlic cloves, or in this case, we are using a garlic press on 6 cloves because we also like it a little garlic-ier. Garlic-ier? Is that the word? More garlicsome?
Is 6 cloves gonna be enough?
All right, so we are going to do 9 garlic cloves. Finally, we are going to grate about 4 teaspoons of fresh ginger. This microplane is the cause of, I think, 100% of the injuries here on the Surik Eats set. And now we're gonna heat up some butter. It is butter chicken after all. This is just gonna be a generous 2 tablespoons. Our butter is melted and some of that foaming has subsided, so we are gonna add our vegetables. These we are gonna cook for about 8 to 10 minutes until the onions get soft and start to brown at the edges a little bit. My eyeballs. You can definitely feel the heat of that serrano pepper a bit in the throat. While we're letting this cook, we've put together a spice mixture. This is 1 tablespoon of garam masala, 1 teaspoon of ground coriander, and then a half teaspoon each of black pepper and ground cumin. And we are just gonna let this toast in the pan for about 2 to 3 minutes. Now that our spices have toasted a little bit, we are gonna add 1.5 cups of water, along with a whole can of tomato paste. Should be about 1/2 cup. That we are just gonna whisk until combined. We are gonna add about 1 tablespoon of sugar and 1 teaspoon of salt. We're gonna whisk that together and then we're gonna bring it to a boil. I'm gonna kill the heat and add in 1 cup of heavy cream. It's not health food. We're getting closer. Now that we've got our sauce almost finished, we are going to blend it smooth. We're gonna blend this in 2 batches because we don't want it to get too high up there. It is incredibly hot. We don't need it entirely smooth. It's okay if there's a little bit of chunks left. I like it a little bit rustic like that, but we just don't want to have whole pieces of onion left in there. Once we've returned our sauce to the pan, we're just gonna bring it back up to a light simmer. And while that goes, I'm gonna chop up the chicken so that it's ready for us to add in. You really just want them to be bite-sized. Once our sauce is back up to a simmer, we are gonna add 2 tablespoons of butter back into the middle of it. Again, I can't stress enough, this is not good for you to eat on a physical level. Spiritual level, maybe. And I'm gonna leave the heat off just until our naan finishes. So now it's been 3 hours since we started our naan dough. We've been preheating the oven and an oven stone at 500 for an hour. And this is ready to start rolling out. It's still just as soft and moist as it was before, so we do have to be a little careful. But we are gonna need this for about 2 to 3 minutes. It is just pillowy soft. I'm just gonna divide it in half, and then I'm gonna divide each of these pieces into 3. You can make the butter chicken ahead of time, and I think that it'll only get better in flavor if you wait the next day. The naan though, I think it definitely tastes better the first day. With each naan, we are going to roll it. We want it to about 6 to 8 inches wide. You don't want it to be too thin though, because if you go too thin, it starts to taste more like a cracker and less like naan. So now we're just gonna throw this straight onto the, oops. That cooks for about 2 minutes and scalds all of the hairs off of your eyebrows. You wanna see it puff up a little bit, and then underneath, you wanna see a little bit of char like that. I think that looks pretty okay. If you're fast enough, you can do 2 at once. But if you're not, that's okay. Obviously, and not in that big of a hurry if you're making naan from scratch. And then, I promise this is the last step, 2 tablespoons of fresh cilantro. And now we're ready to eat. Oh my God. Every time it's just as good. It's a ton of work, but I've never regretted doing it. That is just enough kick too with that serrano pepper. That sauce is just, it's so rich. It's heavily spiced. It's spicy. You can taste the butter and cream. I could definitely just drink it.
I'll try some of this naan.
It's a little pillowy.
Mm-hmm.
Not a lot of flavor by itself, but you can taste a little bit of the yogurt, a little salt. I definitely think the charred bits of chicken are the best pieces. That bitterness definitely shows through with the richness of the sauce. When you have the fresh cilantro, it's an extremely well-balanced dish.
It's just good. This is like restaurant quality.
I would argue this is better than restaurant quality because I've never liked butter chicken. I don't think it's a very interesting flavor. It's usually too muted by the fat.
The first time I had it was in Chicago and it tastes like this, but I think this is better. I like the spice.
Like, it's making me sweat a little bit, but it keeps it fun. Oh man, try this one. It's so soft. I feel that. It's like a little doughy cloud.
You can buy this from the market. I could eat this all day.
Could you eat this every week? That makes sense because we just ate it last week. And it is just as good, if not better now.
I think it's better. You should all make it, because this is bomb. It's so good.
And good for you.
I want a second bowl.
I got a little naan taco. I can eat it on the go. There's nothing here I would change. There's nothing here that I'm a little bit disappointed in. Except I wish there was more sauce, because I could just drink that all day long. Oh. You should make this. I know it's a ton of work, but it's worth it. Even if you don't like butter chicken,
you will like this.
It's one of the single best things we can make. So thank you for watching.
Make sure to like and subscribe.
Bye.